Did you know that Mattel once had the Marvel license? They did, and when they had it, they decided to make a toy line that would compete with Kenner's superpowers at the time, which was hugely successful. Mattel's Secret Wars line is unique because it's not just a toy line, it's also a major comic book event. What happened at the time is that they requested a comic book event to coincide with the toy line to support it. The Secret Wars comic book series was conceived by Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief at Marvel, who believed himself to be the only one capable of taking on the job of writing this limited series. Initially, the series was supposed to be called Cosmic Champions, but after a focus group at Mattel, they determined that secret and wars were two words that children responded to very well, so they changed the name of the series to Secret Wars. Besides this, Mattel also requested new high-tech gear for Doctor Doom and Iron Man, as well as fortresses, playsets, vehicles that the characters would use so that they could include them in the line. So obviously, although this series was incredibly influential in comic books, it was a giant excuse to get a bunch of Marvel characters together and make some toys. At the time, Mattel had lost the DC account to Kenner, and Kenner, when they got the DC license, decided to start making DC superpowers. Ironically, the superpowers line was a reaction to Mattel's own He-Man line, or Masters of the Universe. That's why the superpowers collection is so action feature heavy, because He-Man was the same way. Each character in the Superpowers collection had an action feature. You pressed a button, or you squeezed legs or arms, and they did something. This created a huge emphasis on the superpower of the character, hence why the whole thing was called Superpowers. Needless to say, there were a lot of action figures and accessories produced from 1984 to 1986, so the Secret Wars line had a lot to live up to. And the ultimate question here is, how did Mattel's Secret Wars line compare to Superpowers? And the answer is, well, let's take a look. Mattel's Secret Wars figures were all 4.5 inches tall, they came on a bubble card pack, and the back of the packaging had some artwork and a biography of the character included, as well as which action figures from the line you could buy. Each figure came with this big plastic shield accessory that held a lenticular image inside. And what that means is if you tilted the shield, you could see a different picture at different angles. All the heroes had circular red shields, and all the villains had square gray shields. The image that all these shields displayed was the secret identity of the character if you tilted the shield one way or another. There were more of these lenticular images included with each action figure, so you could stuff it inside the shield and see cartoons at different angles. It's kind of a neat feature, but it seems like something that would lose its luster after you experience it the first time, because every character has it, whereas in the Superpowers collection, everyone did something different. This shield accessory caused a couple of issues with the line. One, Captain America, who was included in Series 1, was very famous for having a shield as his main accessory, but this was the only thing in the package, so this served as his shield, and that wasn't that exciting. And then there was Iron Man, who at the time was James Rhodes, aka War Machine. Throughout the entire Secret Wars series, Rhodey was Iron Man, but on this lenticular image that was included with the Iron Man action figure, it depicts Tony Stark as Iron Man. Even more curious is that the biography on the package lists Rhodey as Iron Man, so Mattel wasn't too careful about this one. You can probably tell where we're going with this, but the quality of Secret Wars was obviously not that great. It looked a lot cheaper than Kenner's Superpowers line did, because a lot of those action figures had very good sculpting. Of course, they all had their own action feature, but Mattel's Secret Wars all pretty much used the same body with a few exceptions here and there. Beyond the shield, there really weren't that many accessories included with the figures. Doctor Doom had a couple of laser guns, Dr. Octopus had his tentacles. One problem with those tentacles on Dr. Octopus is that they were incredibly fragile. I still have a Dr. Octopus to this day that I don't really play around with that much because I'm afraid I'm going to break his tentacles off. They're just made of stiff plastic. They are not bendy tentacles. They look alright, but by God, be careful. As a matter of fact, all the villains come with laser pistols, and the heroes barely come with anything. Wolverine was one of the laziest action figures of all because they didn't even bother to sculpt his claws. They literally just gave him clip-on claws. It was so egregiously lazy, even in 1984. And yeah, man, it looks bad. They just clip right onto his wrist. It looks super cheap. As an aside, one strange fact about the Secret Wars line, guys, is that Mattel requested lady characters to be introduced. And so Marvel did just that. They introduced Titania and Volcana and Julia Carpenter's Spider-Woman. But none of these characters made it into the line, and none of the vehicles, playsets, or anything that Marvel created during the Secret Wars storyline appeared in the line. It had all kinds of other stuff. They had a Marvel Superheroes Freedom Fighter playset. They had a Marvel Supervillains Tower of Doom playset. They also had motorcycles. There was a turbo cycle for the heroes and a doom cycle for the villains. And then there were helicopters. There was a turbo copter for the heroes and a doom copter for the villains. For some reason, they even had gliders. There was a Star Dart glider and a Doom Dart glider. The vehicles were generally pretty well designed, but the gliders were a complete mess. The gliders came with an action figure, but there was no place to set it, so it just fell right off whenever you did anything with it. And then they had one more vehicle. They had a Doom Roller, which honestly was kind of a cool concept. Needless to say, with such poor quality, ill-conceived toys, Series 1 didn't sell that great, and Series 2 was pretty much cut in half. There technically were 8 action figures that were conceived for Series 2 from Secret Wars, but 3 of them weren't released in America. They were only released overseas. Even more curious is that there was only one character in Series 2 that was even in Secret Wars as written by Marvel. Black Costume Spider-Man, Symbiote Spider-Man. To Jim Shooter over at Marvel, it was just a throwaway idea that they were only going to use for maybe one issue, but Mattel loved the idea. Why? Repaint! It enabled them to sell the same action figure twice, and boy were they enthusiastic. The other characters in Series 2 included Baron Zemo, Daredevil, Falcon, and Hobgoblin. Not a bad choice of characters, but they weren't in the storyline, so it was really, really weird. Still, it was kinda cool to get action figures of Baron Zemo and Hobgoblin and Daredevil back in 1984. Funny enough, the accessories for Series 2 were actually a lot better than they were in Series 1, because Hobgoblin came with a plastic cape, Magneto didn't come with a cape, just FYI there. He also came with a purple goblin glider, so that's really nice. And then Falcon came with adjustable plastic wings, he came with red wing, come on, that's really nice. Daredevil came with a billy club, and then Baron Zemo came with a laser pistol. As for the other releases from Series 2, they were Iceman, Constrictor, and Electro. Again, bizarre character choices across the board, but still, really cool to get action figures of these guys way back during the mid-80s. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that Iceman and Electro were good, they were very basic action figures. Iceman was made of opaque white plastic, Electro was just like a straight repaint, Constrictor literally just held his cables in his hands. It was, not great. But as a piece of history and a curiosity and some of the earliest action figures we have of these characters, that's huge. In the end, Soulmates, Secret Wars from Mattel bombed. They didn't put enough effort into the line, and it suffered for it. Secret Wars from Marvel, on the other hand, was one of the biggest storylines they'd ever done and was hugely successful. It wasn't well crafted by any means. The artists were working overtime to get it done. The writing was fly-by-night and juvenile, but everyone who read it and worked on it thought it was fun. And it turned out to be one of Marvel's most successful projects, and it even led to the creation of one of their most popular characters, Venom, because of the black costume that was introduced for Spider-Man during Secret Wars. There were definitely flashes of greatness in this line. Some of the playsets were very fun looking, the vehicles were very fun. The character selection was pretty decent, but they didn't do enough with the sculpts, they didn't do enough with the accessories. They had very, very toyetic action figures characters that they could have made, and then they just didn't. Wolverine, one of the most obviously toyetic characters ever conceived, had clip-on claws. Magneto, the master of magnetism, didn't even have his cape. Dr. Octopus's tentacles could snap off with the slightest bit of pressure. And Captain America didn't even have his shield. It's not hard to see where Mattel went wrong with this line, and it's unfortunate because it showed promise. We could be looking back on something that was the equal of DC superpowers, but instead we're looking back on something that's more of a curiosity, and while it had some great vibes and great ideas, it could have been so much more. Well, Soulmates, what do you think of Marvel Secret Wars by Mattel? Is this a line that you know about? Have you heard about it before? Or is this your first time? Do you have any of these in your collection? Let me know what you think down in the comments, guys. I would love to hear from you. And be sure to check out my other videos in the meantime, everyone. Thanks for watching. I will catch you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.